The sharp, echoing sound of chalk snapping against the green chalkboard cut through the silence of the University of Michigan's lecture hall. The room was packed, over 100 students squeezed into the cold, cavernous space, their eyes fixed on Professor Linda Cartwright as she dissected complex equations with the precision of a surgeon. Rows of visiting professors sat at the front, their faces a blend of curiosity and skepticism. This wasn't just another advanced calculus class. This was a stage where reputations were made and unworthy students were swiftly weeded out. At the center of the room, Daniel Reed sat hunched over his notebook, the hood of his gray sweatshirt casting a shadow over his focused expression. Unlike his peers, he wasn't frantically scribbling down every line. His pen rested on the paper, unmoving. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, studied the equations on the board. And then he saw it, a small, almost imperceptible mistake. The room was a ticking clock, every second marked by the scratch of pens and the quiet hum of laptop keys. But beneath this ordinary academic routine lay an undercurrent of tension. The professors in the front row weren't here by chance. They were here to see if Cartwright's ironclad teaching method truly separated the weak from the strong. And in their eyes, Daniel was nothing more than another student about to be crushed under the weight of her expectations. But he wasn't. Daniel's hand rose slowly, like a flag in a battlefield where only the brave dared to stand. The room seemed to breathe in all at once. All eyes turned to him, a quiet disbelief rippling through the rows. Was he challenging Cartwright? The thought alone was enough to draw a few quiet gasps. Cartwright paused, the chalk held firmly between her fingers, leaving a white smudge on her perfectly tailored blazer. Her expression didn't change. Her face remained a mask of calm, but the silence spoke volumes. Without a word, she turned back to the board, examining the equation. It was flawless, except for that single, tiny flaw. The chalk traced back over the lines, and there it was. Daniel's observation, so subtle yet undeniable. The mistake was real, a fracture in what was supposed to be an unbreakable lecture. The professors in the front row leaned in, their expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue. Even those who had been ready to dismiss him felt the change in the air. The room shifted with the realization. Students who had barely noticed him before now saw him in a different light. Not just a face in the crowd, but a mind sharp enough to cut through the complexity of Cartwright's teaching. The professors exchanged glances, a silent conversation about the potential they had just witnessed. Daniel remained still, his hand now back on his desk, fingers curled around the pen as if it anchored him to reality. His heart pounded not from fear, but from the adrenaline of truth. He hadn't intended to challenge anyone, but the numbers had demanded it, and he had listened. For a moment, Cartwright stood frozen. Then, with the practiced grace of a professional, she erased the error, her movements slow and deliberate. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't offer praise or criticism. Instead, she continued the lecture as if nothing had happened. But everyone knew. Something had changed. Daniel felt the shift too. He hadn't planned to stand out, hadn't sought the spotlight, but it found him. He knew this was just the beginning, the first stone cast in a ripple that might soon become a wave. There was a long road ahead, and he had no intention of backing down. The lesson resumed, but no one was truly listening anymore. The focus had moved, like a spotlight that had shifted from the front of the room to the quiet student in the middle. A whisper of potential, a promise of what was yet to come. And for the first time, Daniel felt it too. Not just the weight of the challenge, but the undeniable spark of something much larger. Something he hadn't even realized he was reaching for until that very moment. The chalkboard, now corrected, stood as a testament to his courage. The lecture hall, once a sterile arena of formulas and theories, had transformed into a battlefield where intellect, not hierarchy, determined the victor. But this was only the opening move. The real game had just begun. After the lecture, the corridors of the university buzzed with low murmurs. Daniel moved through the sea of students like a shadow, his presence more tangible now, but he remained an enigma. Whispers followed him, a blend of admiration and disbelief. Those who had barely noticed him before now cast sidelong glances, wondering if they had just witnessed the rise of something extraordinary. But Daniel wasn't concerned with the attention. His mind remained anchored to the equations, replaying every line of chalk on the board, the rhythm of numbers and logic. He made his way to the library, a sanctuary of silence where he could lose himself in the pages of thick mathematical tomes. His notebook, worn and filled with neat handwriting, lay open on the table. He flipped to a blank page and began to write, not notes, but thoughts, connections, and theories that flowed from his mind in an unbroken stream. The library's dim lighting wrapped around him like a cocoon, separating him from the world outside. At the same time, the university's faculty lounge was anything but quiet. Professor Linda Cartwright sat at the end of a long table, her silver-rimmed glasses perched on the edge of her nose as she read through a stack of papers. The visiting professors from earlier gathered around, some still discussing the lecture. Cartwright's expression remained neutral, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped her coffee cup. She had built her career on being the gatekeeper of excellence, the arbiter of who did and did not belong in her world of advanced mathematics. Daniel's quiet correction had slipped through her defenses like a thin blade. One of the professors leaned in, his voice lowered but still carrying a note of intrigue. He mentioned Daniel, the precision of his observation, and the calm with which he had delivered it. Others nodded, curiosity spreading like wildfire. Someone suggested inviting Daniel to a departmental review, a chance to see if his earlier display was mere luck or the sign of genuine talent. Cartwright agreed, her voice smooth but with an edge of control. She needed to know if this young man was a prodigy or just another student who had stumbled upon the right answer. The email arrived in Daniel's inbox the next morning. The invitation was framed as an opportunity to participate in an open problem-solving session, a chance to engage with the brightest minds in the faculty. The tone was formal, but Daniel read between the lines. This wasn't an invitation, it was a test. The kind you couldn't study for, where every move would be scrutinized, every answer dissected. He closed the laptop, his expression unreadable. He knew what was at stake. It wasn't just about solving equations. It was about proving that he belonged. On the day of the session, the lecture hall was arranged differently. The front row of seats had been replaced with a long table, where Cartwright and her colleagues sat like a panel of judges. The room was packed with students, their curiosity palpable. Daniel stood at the edge of the room waiting. His heart beat steadily, his mind clear. When Cartwright signaled for him to begin, he moved forward without hesitation. The problem on the board was not only complex, but designed to test his limits. It involved layers of variables, nested transformations, and integrals that wound through the equation like tangled vines. Daniel studied it, the chalk cool in his hand. He began to write, slowly at first, his strokes precise. The room seemed to hold its breath. As he continued, his pace quickened. Each line of math built upon the last, a cascade of logic and reason that unraveled the problem with a methodical grace. He did not rush, but moved with a quiet confidence that spoke louder than words. The visiting professors leaned forward, some jotting notes, others simply staring. When he set the chalk down, the board was a tapestry of symbols and solutions, every line purposeful. Cartwright's face remained impassive, but the silence from the panel spoke volumes. They reviewed his work, their discussions a quiet murmur. Daniel stood still, not fidgeting, not looking away. He knew he had done well, but he also understood this was only the beginning. The verdict came in the form of a nod, a simple gesture, but it rippled through the room. Cartwright rose, her expression as polished as ever. She announced that Daniel had shown remarkable skill, suggesting that he be considered for upcoming academic challenges. It was both acknowledgement and another test, a push to see how far he could go. The students in the audience broke into applause, and for the first time, Daniel allowed himself a small, almost invisible smile. As the room emptied, Cartwright remained at the front, watching Daniel as he left. There was a calculation in her gaze, a careful assessment. She was not defeated but intrigued. She saw in him a potential not only to excel but to challenge the very structure she had built. And while her expression remained calm, inside she knew this was a game she had to play carefully. Daniel had become more than a student. He was now a variable in an equation she was determined to solve. Daniel walked back to the library, his steps steady. He opened his notebook again, not to write but to think. the pages filled with quiet possibilities, the kind that only numbers could unlock. He knew that this was the start of something larger, a path that stretched out before him with both promise and danger. The test was over, but the real challenge was only just beginning. And as he sat there surrounded by books and the hum of fluorescent lights, he felt a sense of clarity. He was ready. The morning of the National Mathematics Competition arrived with a sharp, biting cold that seemed to slice through the University of Pennsylvania. The grand auditorium, a place where the best mathematical minds in the country had gathered, buzzed with anticipation. Daniel stood near the entrance, his breath visible in the air, his expression calm but focused. He had spent the last few weeks in intense preparation, dissecting equations, finding new methods, and pushing his mind to the absolute edge. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the next few hours, the ticking clock, and the problems that awaited him. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of expectation. Students from prestigious universities filled the seats, their conversations a blend of theories and strategies. The front row was lined with judges, including Professor Linda Cartwright, who sat with a notebook open and a pen poised, her demeanor as cool and unreadable as ever. She had seen Daniel's talent firsthand, but this was different. Here he wasn't just competing against his classmates. He was up against the elite, those who had been preparing for this moment their entire academic lives. Daniel took his seat, his notebook resting on his lap. He opened it, the pages filled with equations, notes, and small reminders to himself. He didn't need them now, but the familiarity of his handwriting, the structured lines of logic, brought him a sense of calm. He knew that around him, other students were running through their own mental exercises, some staring blankly at the ceiling, others tapping their pens in a rhythm of anxiety. He remained still, his mind a quiet stream amidst the rushing river of nerves. When the first problem appeared on the massive screen at the front of the room, a hush fell over the audience. The equation sprawled across the digital board, a complex mix of variables, integrals, and multi-step transformations. It was a gatekeeper, designed to weed out those who were not ready. Daniel's pen moved immediately, not rushed but deliberate. His process was methodical. While others paused to interpret the problem, he had already seen the pattern, the thread that unraveled the complexity into manageable steps. The minutes ticked by, each one a grain of sand slipping through an invisible hourglass. The judges observed closely, their eyes shifting between the contestants. Some students began to falter, their pens slowing, erasers rubbing furiously against the paper. Daniel's movements remained steady, his pen gliding over the page as if the answer had been waiting for him all along. His approach wasn't just about solving the problem, but about demonstrating an understanding that went beyond the surface. He layered each step with purpose, building the solution like a structure that could withstand any scrutiny. Across the room, Cartwright's expression remained neutral, but her hand moved swiftly across the page, noting his progress. She had positioned herself not just as a judge, but as a strategist. Every line he drew was a data point, every answer a piece of a puzzle she was determined to understand. She had seen students rise and fall, but Daniel's calm under pressure set him apart. She found herself in a strange place, somewhere between anticipation and unease. The first round concluded with the soft chime of a bell. Papers were collected, and the judges retreated to review the answers. Daniel sat back, closing his notebook. Around him, other students exchanged glances, some relieved, others clearly unsettled. A few eyes landed on him, a mixture of respect and wariness. He was no longer invisible, no longer the quiet student in a gray hoodie. He had become a contender, a variable that no one had accounted for. The break was brief, just enough time for water and a deep breath. When the judges returned, the next set of problems appeared on the screen. These were more advanced, designed not only to test knowledge but to stretch the boundaries of intuition and speed. The room seemed to hold its breath as the contestants began. Daniel's approach remained unchanged, deliberate, methodical, precise. He moved through the problems with a confidence that made time feel irrelevant. Each solution flowed into the next, his focus a razor's edge. As the session continued, a shift became noticeable. Some students began to falter, their confidence cracking under the pressure. The MIT student, who had been touted as a favorite, hesitated, his pen stalling mid-equation. The judges noticed, and so did Cartwright. Her eyes moved from the struggling student back to Daniel, who remained unflinching. She scribbled a note, her expression tightening just enough to betray her thoughts. The competition was not going as she had expected. By the time the final problem appeared, the room had thinned. Contestants who had started with such determination now sat back, their faces a mix of fatigue and resignation. The last problem was a gauntlet, a nonlinear equation with layers of nested functions and an obscure transformation that required not only skill, but innovation. Daniel set his pen down, just for a moment, his eyes tracing the lines of the problem. He could feel the weight of every glance, the collective tension pressing in from all sides. But he did not rush. He approached the problem like he had all the others, with clarity and a method that left no room for error. When he began to write, the room seemed to exhale. His pen moved with a rhythm, each stroke precise. The solution unfolded, not just correctly but elegantly. There was an efficiency to his method, a way of navigating the problem that bypassed unnecessary steps. When he finished, he set his pen down again, his body language unchanged as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The final bell rang, and the judges began collecting the papers. Cartwright closed her notebook slowly, her face a mask. But beneath the surface, thoughts moved quickly. She had seen something today that defied her expectations. Daniel had not only held his ground, but had done so with a mastery that few could match. The auditorium began to empty, the students filing out, some heads held high, others lowered in defeat. Daniel remained seated, waiting, his expression as calm as when he had entered. He knew that whatever happened next, he had done what he came to do. The problems were not just tests of knowledge but of character, of the ability to remain steady when the world watched and waited. He stood slowly, gathering his notebook, his pen. The judges huddled together, their voices low, but he did not need to hear their words. He knew that today was more than a competition. It was a step forward, a path that led not only to recognition, but to a place where his potential could truly unfold. As he left the room, he could feel the change, not in the air, but in himself. He was ready. The results of the first round were announced, and Daniel's name appeared at the top of the leaderboard. His performance was not just impressive, but nearly flawless. His solutions not only correct, but presented with a clarity that stood out among the competitors. Whispers filled the hall as students exchanged looks, some with newfound respect, others with disbelief. The competition had attracted the brightest minds from the most prestigious universities, and yet here was Daniel, a quiet figure who had managed to not only keep up, but outshine them all. The judges, including Professor Cartwright, sat at the long panel table, their expressions a mixture of intrigue and professionalism. She scribbled notes, her pen moving swiftly as she reviewed his work. Each line he had written during the test was scrutinized, every calculation double-checked. Cartwright's practiced eye moved methodically, but beneath her calm exterior, she could not hide the slight furrow of her brow. She had expected talent, perhaps even brilliance, but not this level of mastery. His approach was not just methodical, but innovative, displaying a thought process that suggested a depth of understanding well beyond his years. As the second round began, the problems presented grew more challenging. The equations were now multi-layered, with hidden variables and complex transformations. The kind of problems designed not only to test knowledge, but to push the contestants to the very edge of their cognitive limits. The room fell silent as the participants turned their attention to the screens, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound that remained. Daniel did not hesitate. His pen moved across the paper with a fluidity that seemed almost rehearsed. But this was no act. His mind dissected the problem into manageable pieces, his thoughts forming pathways through the tangled mass of numbers and symbols. While others paused, considered, and rechecked their work, Daniel seemed to flow from one step to the next, his confidence a quiet ripple in the room's stillness. The judges watched closely. Cartwright leaned forward slightly, a movement so subtle that only those closest to her might have noticed. She had seen many students over the years, some brilliant, others merely good at appearing so. But Daniel was different. His solutions were not just correct, but showed a level of elegance that could not be faked. She continued to write in her notebook, her mind balancing on a thin line between admiration and caution. The second round came to a close, and once again, Daniel's name remained at the top. His closest competitor, a graduate student from MIT, had struggled with the final question, leaving his paper filled with corrections and half-erased formulas. The judges took a short break, and the students were allowed to leave their seats. Daniel remained where he was, his notebook open, his pen resting on the page. He did not review his work, did not look around to gauge the reactions of those around him. He sat still, his mind quiet. The room slowly filled with a low hum of voices. Some students gathered in small groups, their whispers filled with theories about the next round. Others paced, their nerves on full display. The MIT student, a tall figure with sharp features, cast a glance toward Daniel. It was not an expression of friendship or camaraderie, but of curiosity, as if trying to decipher what lay beneath the calm surface. Cartwright approached the panel of judges, her voice low but firm as she discussed the upcoming problems. She suggested a shift in difficulty, a set of equations that would not only challenge the contestants, but force them to adapt quickly. The other judges nodded in agreement, their expressions a mix of support and reservation. They wanted a fair test, but they also wanted to see who could handle the pressure when the competition reached its peak. The break ended, and the room settled into silence once more. The final round began with a problem that filled the entire digital board. It was a maze of logic, a nonlinear differential equation with multiple layers of complexity. Some students hesitated, their pens hovering over the page as they tried to find a way in. Daniel's pen touched paper, and he began. His method was different this time. Instead of attacking the problem head-on, he approached it from the side, working through smaller equations that built toward the larger solution. His approach was unconventional, a method that not only simplified the process, but also revealed insights that others might have missed. The judges took note. Cartwright's pen paused mid-note as she recognized his strategy. It was not one she had taught, not one that appeared in the standard academic texts. She watched, her mind working through his process, understanding not only what he was doing, but why. The room remained still, the air thick with concentration. The other students continued to write, their papers filling with calculations. Some had taken the conventional route, others seemed lost, their solutions trailing off into incomplete thoughts. Daniel remained steady, his pen moving with a rhythm that spoke of clarity and purpose. When the final bell rang, he set his pen down, his body language unchanged. The judges collected the papers, their expressions guarded as they moved through the room. The contestants sat back, some closing their eyes, others staring at their papers as if they might still change what was written. Daniel sat quietly, his notebook closed, his hands folded over it. He did not need to see the results to know how he had performed. The room began to empty slowly, the judges retreating to their chambers to review the final round. Cartwright walked past Daniel's seat, her eyes briefly meeting his. There was no exchange of words, no sign of what she was thinking. But as she disappeared through the door, Daniel knew that this was more than just a competition. It was a turning point, a moment where paths diverged and futures were decided. The auditorium remained still, a place of echoes and possibilities. Daniel remained seated, his thoughts clear and focused. He knew the judges would deliberate, that there would be discussions and evaluations. But he also knew that numbers did not lie, that truth had a way of surfacing no matter how deep it was buried. He stood moving slowly to the exit, his steps steady. Outside, the cold air wrapped around him, sharp and real. He breathed it in, a reminder that whatever happened next, he had already won something far more valuable than any title or recognition. He had proven to himself that he could stand among the best, not just survive, but excel. And as he walked away from the grand hall, he felt not the weight of uncertainty, but the lightness of possibility. The results of the final round were announced in a manner befitting the gravity of the competition. A single judge stepped to the center of the stage, his expression solemn as he held the list of scores. The room had filled again, the contestants seated with their backs straight, their faces a mixture of hope and apprehension. Daniel sat among them, his hands resting on the edge of his notebook, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. The judge began reading the names, starting from the lower ranks, each name a heartbeat closer to the top. The room remained silent, each announcement met with a mix of quiet applause and muted disappointment. As the list narrowed, a tension built, a collective breath held by everyone in the room. The MIT student's name was called in third place. He accepted the position with a nod, his expression a mask of professionalism, but the tightness in his jaw spoke of the sting of defeat. The second place name belonged to a graduate student from Stanford, a young woman who had been a favorite to win. She managed a small smile, her composure intact, but the shift in her eyes revealed the disappointment beneath. And then, only one name remained. The judge paused, letting the moment stretch. The anticipation in the room was palpable, every eye fixed on the stage. Finally, he announced Daniel Reed as the winner, his voice firm and clear. Applause erupted, a wave of sound that filled the auditorium. Some students rose to their feet, their clapping more than just a formality. It was genuine respect. Daniel stood, his movements measured as he walked to the stage. The judge extended his hand, and Daniel shook it firmly, his grip steady. He accepted the small, unassuming trophy, its metal surface catching the light. He turned to face the audience, his expression remaining calm, his presence quiet but undeniable. The applause continued, a rhythm that seemed to echo beyond the walls of the auditorium. Among the faces in the crowd, Daniel saw both recognition and acceptance. The weight of those moments was not lost on him. He had walked into this competition as an unknown, a quiet figure among giants. But he had proven that brilliance did not need a reputation to precede it. His victory was not just about solving equations, but about breaking through the invisible barriers that had always surrounded him. As the ceremony concluded, the contestants filed out, some moving quickly to escape the disappointment, others lingering to congratulate him. He accepted each gesture with a quiet nod, his humility never wavering. The judges approached him as well, including Professor Cartwright. She held out her hand, her expression composed, but her eyes showing a flicker of something deeper. He shook her hand, the exchange brief but significant. She did not speak, and neither did he, but the silence held a mutual understanding. Outside, the winter air had grown colder, the sky a soft gray that seemed to stretch endlessly. Daniel stood on the steps of the building, the trophy held loosely at his side. His mind replayed the events of the day, each step, each answer, every moment where he had held his ground. His success felt real, not just a dream or a fleeting achievement. It was a foundation, something he could build upon. As he started to walk, his phone vibrated. A message from his only close friend back at the University of Michigan. It was short, just a few words, but it brought a rare smile to his face. "Knew you'd win. Proud of you." He typed a quick response, his fingers cold against the screen, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. His steps were slow, each one measured, as if he was grounding himself in this new reality. He knew that this victory was not an endpoint, but a door opening to new opportunities, new challenges. He welcomed it, not with arrogance, but with a quiet readiness. When he returned to the university, the atmosphere had changed. His peers looked at him differently, their glances filled with respect. Even those who had doubted him before seemed to carry a sense of acknowledgement. Professors greeted him with a nod, some with invitations to join research projects or advanced study groups. Daniel accepted them thoughtfully, choosing only what aligned with his goals. He remained focused, never letting the praise cloud his purpose. He continued his routine, his days filled with study and quiet reflection. His notebook, once filled with the thoughts of a student trying to find his place, now became a canvas for new ideas, new theories. He shared his insights openly, helping classmates who struggled, offering guidance without expectation. His presence in the lecture halls became a source of stability. Students began to seek him out, not just for answers, but for his perspective. He spoke with clarity, his words measured, his approach always rooted in the logic that had guided him through every challenge. His influence grew, not as a forceful leader, but as a quiet example of what perseverance and intellect could achieve. Cartwright maintained her position as a professor, her demeanor unchanged, but there was a subtle shift in how she approached her students. She became more open to questions, more willing to engage in discussions that allowed different viewpoints. Her lectures remained rigorous, but they now included moments where she would pause, invite input, and listen. It was a change that did not go unnoticed. The dynamic of the classroom evolved, the rigid hierarchy giving way to an environment where learning was a shared experience. Students who had once sat in silence now participated, their confidence growing. The university felt the ripple effects of Daniel's impact, his story a quiet revolution. Daniel's path forward remained clear. He did not chase recognition, but focused on the work, on the numbers, and the truths they revealed. He accepted that his success was not only his own, but a step forward for others who might follow. He understood the responsibility that came with his achievements, the need to use his platform to encourage those who felt invisible. The winter gave way to spring, and as the seasons changed, so did the university. The walls that had once seemed to hold so many back now became doors to new possibilities, and Daniel remained at the center of it. Not as a figurehead, but as a reminder that talent and determination could change everything. He continued to walk his path, his steps steady, his mind clear. The story of his victory became more than a tale of competition. It became a lesson in humility, perseverance, and the power of quiet strength. And through it all, Daniel remained true to himself, knowing that the real success lay not in the applause, but in the quiet moments when he sat with his notebook. The page is still open to whatever came next. Weeks passed, and Daniel's quiet victory continued to ripple through the University of Michigan. His name was spoken with a new kind of respect. His presence in the lecture halls, a subtle reminder that brilliance often emerged from unexpected places. Despite the recognition, Daniel remained grounded, his focus unshaken. He continued to fill his notebooks with ideas, equations, and hypotheses, a constant stream of thought that guided him forward. His routine stayed the same. Early mornings in the library, afternoons in class, and evenings spent solving complex problems that challenged even the brightest minds. The university began to shift around him. Professors who had once viewed their roles as gatekeepers started opening doors, offering opportunities to students who showed potential, regardless of their background. Daniel became an unofficial mentor to many, his quiet demeanor and willingness to help drawing in those who struggled to find their footing. His desk in the library became a small hub where students gathered, seeking guidance not just in mathematics, but in how to approach learning itself. He never turned anyone away, and his explanations were always clear, practical, and patient. He shared not only the solutions, but the process, teaching them to see the path through the problem rather than just the destination. His approach was never about showing off, but about lifting others, creating a space where questions were welcomed and mistakes seen as part of the journey. His influence extended beyond academics. He encouraged students to think critically, to approach challenges with a mindset that valued curiosity over fear. His impact was subtle, woven into the fabric of everyday life at the university, but it was undeniable. The changes were most visible in the classroom of Professor Linda Cartwright. Her lectures, once rigid and one-sided, began to evolve. She started asking open-ended questions, engaging with students in discussions that allowed for different perspectives. She would present a problem and then pause, inviting the class to explore solutions together. The atmosphere shifted from one of quiet compliance to active participation. Cartwright's transformation did not go unnoticed. Students began to enjoy her classes, the tension replaced with a shared eagerness to learn. She maintained her high standards, her expectations still rigorous, but there was a new openness, a willingness to see beyond the answers to the thinking behind them. It was clear that Daniel's influence had reached even those who had once doubted him. As spring approached, a new opportunity emerged. The university announced an advanced research program, offering students a chance to work alongside professors on real-world mathematical projects. The selection process was competitive, but Daniel's name was at the top of the list. He was offered a position not only as a participant, but as a leader, tasked with guiding a small team of students through complex research that would be presented at a national symposium. He accepted, not with the excitement of someone chasing recognition, but with the calm of a person ready for the next challenge. His team included students from various disciplines, each bringing a different skill set to the project. Daniel approached the role of leader with the same quiet strength he had shown throughout his academic journey. He set clear goals, outlined the research process, and ensured that everyone understood their part. He fostered an environment where ideas were valued and collaboration was key. He led by example, working alongside his team, tackling problems and exploring new methods. His approach was methodical but flexible, allowing for creativity within the structure he had built. The project evolved quickly, the team's progress surpassing expectations. Their research focused on mathematical models that could optimize resource distribution in urban environments. It was a topic with real-world implications, a project that not only showcased mathematical theory, but applied it in a way that could make a tangible difference. The presentation at the National Symposium was a turning point. Daniel's team stood before an audience of academics, professionals, and students from across the country. He spoke with clarity, presenting their findings not as a personal achievement, but as a collective effort. He highlighted each team member's contributions, sharing the stage and the credit. His humility resonated with the audience, his words not only informative but inspiring. The applause that followed was genuine, a recognition not only of the project's success, but of the leadership that had brought it to fruition. The experience solidified Daniel's place at the university, not just as a student, but as a thought leader. His reputation spread beyond the campus, drawing interest from research institutions and potential collaborators. He received offers for internships and advanced studies, doors opening that he had once only imagined. Through it all, he remained the same. His goals had not changed. He sought knowledge, understanding, and the opportunity to make a difference. His success was not a destination, but a step on a path he intended to keep walking. The university continued to change as well. Inspired by Daniel's journey, new programs were developed to support underrepresented students, to nurture talent wherever it was found. The culture of competition began to shift towards collaboration, a legacy that would last long after Daniel had moved on. As the semester drew to a close, he found himself once again in the quiet of the library. His notebook lay open before him, pages filled with fresh ideas, the beginnings of new projects. The window beside him framed the campus, the green of spring bringing life to the familiar surroundings. He sat back, the pen resting against his fingers, a small smile touching his lips. His story was not about winning competitions or earning accolades. It was about proving to himself that he could stand where he had always dreamed of being. It was about using his talent not as a shield, but as a bridge, connecting him to others, lifting those around him. Daniel had become more than just a student. He was a part of something larger, a community he had helped to shape. And as he sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the library, he knew that his journey was far from over. There were more challenges ahead, more problems to solve, more paths to walk. And he would meet them all with the same quiet determination, the same strength that had brought him this far. The world outside was changing, and so was he. But at his core, he remained the same, a young man with a notebook, a pen, and a mind ready to explore whatever came next. The sun cast long shadows across the campus as Daniel walked toward the main lecture hall. Today was not a day for quiet study or hidden calculations. Instead, he had been asked to give a guest lecture to incoming students, a new initiative by the university to inspire freshmen with stories of perseverance and achievement. It was not the kind of attention he usually sought, but Daniel understood the power of sharing his journey. He knew that somewhere in the audience might be someone who needed to hear that talent, and hard work could overcome the invisible barriers that often held back potential. The hall filled quickly, rows of young faces looking expectantly at the stage. Some students sat forward, their notebooks open, pens poised to capture every word. Others leaned back, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Daniel stood behind the podium, his notebook resting on the surface, the same well-worn pages that had traveled with him through every challenge. His fingers brushed over the cover, a small grounding gesture before he began. His voice, steady and calm, filled the room. He spoke not of his achievements, but of the questions that had driven him. He described his early days at the university, the quiet corners of the library where he had found solace, the long hours spent unraveling complex problems. He shared how he had faced not only academic challenges, but also the doubt, both from others and within himself. His story unfolded naturally, a blend of struggle and small victories, each step forward a reminder that success was not a straight line, but a path with many twists. He highlighted the importance of persistence, how failure was not the end, but a part of the learning process. His words were simple, his message clear. It was not about being the best, but about being better than yesterday. As he spoke, the room seemed to draw closer. Students who had started with detached expressions now leaned in, their attention fully captured. Daniel moved beyond his own experiences, offering practical advice on study habits, on how to approach problems methodically. He shared strategies that had helped him, from breaking down complex tasks into smaller steps to maintaining a mindset focused on progress over perfection. The lecture was not just a recounting of past events, but a blueprint for building resilience. He spoke about how he had learned to embrace uncertainty, to use it as a tool rather than a barrier. His voice remained even, his tone neither boastful nor self-deprecating. He presented his journey as a series of choices, each one rooted in the decision to keep moving forward despite the obstacles. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment, a quiet filled with thought rather than emptiness. Then a wave of applause rolled through the hall, a genuine response to his authenticity. Daniel stepped back from the podium, allowing the moment to belong to everyone present. Afterwards, students approached him with questions, their voices filled with the same hope and uncertainty he had once felt. He answered each one, taking time to listen, his responses thoughtful and encouraging. He saw in them not only the future of the university, but the echoes of his own journey. As the room began to empty, Daniel remained behind, speaking with a few students who lingered. One young man, his voice barely above a whisper, shared how he had almost given up on his studies. He explained how the weight of expectations had made every mistake feel permanent. Daniel listened intently, his expression open and understanding. He shared how he too had felt lost at times, how the pressure could become a shadow over every success. He offered the young man a simple strategy, to focus not on what he had failed to achieve, but on what he had learned from each experience. His words were not a lecture, but a conversation, a bridge that allowed the student to see a way forward. When they finally left the hall, Daniel felt a quiet satisfaction. It was not the applause or the recognition that mattered, but the connection, the knowledge that his story had become a stepping stone for someone else. His role had shifted from student to mentor, from observer to guide. It was a responsibility he accepted with humility, knowing that the true measure of success was not in accolades, but in the impact on others. Outside, the campus had taken on in the soft hues of evening. The pathways were filled with students moving in all directions, each on their own journey. Daniel walked slowly, his mind clear. His path remained steady, not toward an end, but through a continuum of learning and teaching. He understood that his experiences were part of a larger narrative, one that included every student who dared to push beyond their limits. He did not see himself as a hero or a savior. Instead, he viewed his role as part of a community, a thread in the tapestry of a place where ideas grew and knowledge flourished. His contributions were not the final word, but part of an ongoing conversation, one where every voice mattered. He reached the library, the place where so much of his story had unfolded. It remained the same, a haven of books and quiet, of potential waiting to be realized. He took his usual seat, the familiar wooden chair by the window, and opened his notebook. The pages welcomed new ideas, fresh thoughts that flowed easily, a mix of logic and imagination. The rhythm of his pen on paper was a comfort, a reminder that every moment held the promise of discovery. As the light faded outside, Daniel remained in the soft glow of the desk lamp. His mind danced through equations and possibilities, his thoughts free to explore. He had found his place not just in the university, but in the world. It was a place built not on recognition, but on the quiet strength of knowing he had more to give. He would continue to teach, to learn, to share his journey, and in doing so, he would remain a part of something much larger than himself, a legacy of learning, of growth, and of quiet, persistent hope. The air was crisp as Daniel walked through the main courtyard of the university. Spring had settled in, bringing with it a freshness that matched the quiet optimism he felt. The trees, once bare and brittle, now bloomed with soft greens, their leaves whispering in the breeze. It was a reminder of change, of growth, elements that had defined his journey over the past year. His notebook rested in his hands, the worn edges a testament to the countless ideas and equations it held. He had just left a meeting with the university's research board, where his proposal for a new project had been accepted. It was an ambitious study, one that aimed to apply advanced mathematical models to real-world problems in urban planning. The project wasn't just about theory, but about creating tangible solutions that could improve lives. His team, a mix of students and faculty, had already begun initial research. The group meetings were lively, filled with debate and collaboration. Daniel led with the same quiet confidence that had become his signature style. He did not command but guided, allowing each member to contribute, fostering an environment where every voice was valued. His approach turned the project into more than just an academic exercise. It became a learning experience for everyone involved. As he moved through campus, he passed by familiar faces. Some nodded in greeting, others offered small smiles. The respect he had earned felt genuine, not born from the echoes of his achievements, but from the consistency of his actions. He had become a fixture at the university, not as a star, but as a steady presence, someone who always had time to listen, to help, to share his insights. He reached the doors of the mathematics building and stepped inside. The hallway was quiet, the kind of silence that held promise rather than emptiness. He made his way to a small conference room where his team had gathered. The whiteboard at the front of the room was already filled with diagrams and notes from their last session. His team was a blend of students, some fresh-faced freshmen, others seasoned graduate students. Each brought a unique perspective to the table. They had been working on modeling traffic flow in densely populated urban areas, seeking to optimize routes and reduce congestion using mathematical algorithms. It was a challenge that required not only technical skill, but creativity and patience. Daniel greeted them, setting his notebook on the table. The room settled into focus, the conversation naturally shifting to their current challenges. They discussed data collection methods, debated the efficacy of different algorithms, and mapped out next steps. Daniel listened more than he spoke, his guidance surfacing only when needed, often in the form of a question rather than a directive. His method encouraged his team to think deeper, to find solutions rather than wait for them. The project had reached a critical stage where theory met application. They had developed a prototype model that could predict traffic patterns based on real-time data. The next step was testing it with actual inputs from city transportation networks. It was a complex transition, one that required precision and adaptability. The team worked through lunch, their focus unwavering. They ran simulations, adjusted variables, and refined their model. At one point, a mistake in the code caused the simulation to crash, a cascade of red errors filling the screen. A few faces fell, frustration simmering beneath the surface. Daniel remained calm, his expression unchanged. He saw the setback not as a failure, but as an opportunity to learn. He suggested breaking down the problem, isolating each step to find where things had gone wrong. His patience helped diffuse the tension, and soon the room was filled with the soft clatter of keyboards and the quiet hum of problem-solving. By late afternoon, the issue had been resolved. The simulation ran smoothly, producing data that aligned with their predictions. The breakthrough reignited the room's energy, smiles replacing frowns as they saw their hard work come to life. Daniel shared in their excitement, his satisfaction not just in the result, but in the process that had led them there. The day's work ended with a brief meeting, each team member summarizing their tasks for the coming week. Daniel emphasized the importance of balance, reminding them to take breaks, to avoid burnout. He had learned through experience that sustainable progress came from pacing oneself, from knowing when to push forward and when to rest. As the room emptied, Daniel remained behind, his notebook open on the table. He reviewed their notes, his mind already mapping out the next phase of the project. His focus was unwavering, but there was a lightness to his thoughts. He knew they were on the right path, knew that their work could lead to real impact. Outside, the evening settled in, painting the campus with soft shadows. He finally stood, stretching before gathering his things. His walk back to his dorm was unhurried, each step a reflection of his steady approach to life. He thought about the students he had worked with, how they had grown, how they had found their own strengths. It was a reminder that his role was not just to lead, but to inspire, to create an environment where others could find their own paths. In his room, he set his notebook on his desk, flipping through the pages. His handwriting filled every corner, a tapestry of equations, thoughts, and reflections. He found an empty page and began to write, capturing the lessons of the day, the insights that had surfaced during their work. It was a habit that had become a ritual, a way to close each chapter while opening the door to the next. He knew their project was just a small piece of a larger puzzle, that their work would be a contribution to a field where progress was built on countless individual efforts. But he also understood that every step forward mattered, that each solved problem brought them closer to a better understanding of the world around them. As he wrote, he felt a sense of clarity. His journey had never been about recognition, but about discovery, about using his mind to create something meaningful. His path remained clear, guided by the same principles that had brought him this far: curiosity, persistence, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. The evening deepened, the world outside settling into quiet. Daniel closed his notebook, his thoughts still lingering on the possibilities ahead. He turned off the light, the room fading into shadows, but his mind remained bright, filled with the promise of tomorrow. He had found his place not just in the university, but within himself. And as he drifted into sleep, he knew that his story was far from over. There were more challenges to face, more ideas to explore, and he was ready, as he had always been, to take each step with intention, with purpose, and with the quiet strength that had defined him from the start. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of progress and challenges. Daniel's research project on urban traffic optimization had attracted attention from beyond the university. Local city planners reached out, intrigued by the potential real-world application of his mathematical models. What started as an academic exercise was now evolving into something tangible, a chance to make a real impact on the community. His team met almost daily. Their small conference room transformed into a hub of innovation. The whiteboard was a living canvas, constantly filled and erased as ideas flowed. Diagrams of traffic patterns, coded algorithms, and statistical data surrounded them. The project had become more than just numbers. It was a story being written in real time, each discovery a new chapter. The team consisted of students from different disciplines: engineering, computer science, and mathematics. Each brought a unique perspective, and Daniel orchestrated their contributions with quiet precision. He encouraged open discussions, often stepping back to let others take the lead. His leadership style was rooted in trust, allowing his peers to explore their ideas while guiding them subtly back on course when needed. The project had reached a critical phase, integrating their mathematical model with real-time data provided by the city's traffic monitoring systems. It was a complex task, involving not only technical skill, but also negotiation with local authorities. Daniel, who had always been more comfortable with equations than with bureaucracy, found himself in meetings with city officials, explaining his team's work and the potential benefits. His presentations were clear and to the point. He spoke not in the abstract, but with concrete examples of how their model could reduce congestion, improve emergency response times, and enhance overall safety. The officials listened, their initial skepticism giving way to genuine interest. By the end of the meeting, they had agreed to a trial run of the system in a small but busy section of the city. It was a victory, not just for Daniel, but for his entire team. Back at the university, the atmosphere was electric. The trial would involve real-time data integration, allowing their algorithm to predict and suggest traffic flow adjustments on the fly. It was a test not only of their model's accuracy, but of their ability to handle the unpredictability of real-world variables. The team set up their operations in a classroom converted into a makeshift control center. Laptops and monitors displayed streams of data, each line a pulse of the city's movement. They watched as their model processed the information, creating dynamic route suggestions that could alleviate congestion. The first hours were smooth. The data matched their predictions and the model adjusted seamlessly. But as the day progressed, unexpected variables emerged. A sudden road closure due to construction threw off the algorithm, causing a temporary spike in traffic in an adjacent area. Daniel's calm demeanor held steady. He guided his team through troubleshooting, isolating the issue and reconfiguring the model. His approach remained methodical, breaking the problem into smaller parts and addressing each systematically. His team followed his lead, their focus undeterred by the setback. After an intense hour of adjustments, the model recalibrated. The traffic patterns stabilized, and the system began to function as intended once more. The city officials monitored the process remotely, and when the data showed a measurable improvement in traffic flow, they reached out with praise. The trial was deemed a success, with discussions already beginning about expanding the project to cover a larger area. The sense of accomplishment among Daniel's team was palpable. They had turned a theoretical concept into a practical tool, something that could genuinely improve daily life for thousands of people. Their celebration was modest, shared smiles and quiet acknowledgments, but the satisfaction ran deep. The project continued to evolve. Daniel and his team refined their model, incorporating the lessons learned from the trial. They expanded their research, exploring how the algorithm could be adapted for use in other areas, such as emergency response routing or public transportation scheduling. The possibilities seemed endless, each new idea a branch on a growing tree of potential. Throughout this process, Daniel remained the same. His success had not altered his approach to work or his interactions with others. He continued to spend time in the library, his notebook open to fresh pages filled with new ideas. He remained approachable, always willing to offer help or listen to others. His story had become a source of inspiration at the university. Students who had once only seen him as a quiet presence in the back of the room now sought his advice. Professors began to incorporate his methods into their lessons, demonstrating how persistence and critical thinking could lead to innovation. His influence was a thread woven into the fabric of the campus, a quiet but constant reminder that change often started with a single step forward. As the semester drew to a close, the university hosted a symposium where Daniel's team presented their project. The audience included not only students and faculty, but also city officials and professionals from the technology sector. The presentation was a culmination of their work, a clear, concise demonstration of how their algorithm functioned and the impact it had already made. Daniel spoke with his usual calm, highlighting not just the success but the challenges they had faced. He gave credit to his team, acknowledging each member's contribution. His humility resonated with the audience, his words reinforcing the message that true achievement came from collaboration and resilience. The applause that followed was warm and sustained. After the presentation, attendees approached him with questions and opportunities. He received invitations to collaborate on new projects, offers for internships, and suggestions for advanced studies. He accepted each conversation with gratitude, careful to evaluate every option not by the prestige it offered, but by the value it could add to his learning and growth. The university recognized his contributions formally, awarding him a scholarship to support his continued studies. It was a moment of validation, but for Daniel, the true reward lay in the journey itself, in the late nights spent problem-solving, the quiet moments of breakthrough, and the shared joy of his team's success. His story became a cornerstone of the university's narrative, an example of how talent and persistence could transform not only an individual, but an entire community. And yet, through it all, Daniel remained focused on what lay ahead. His path was still unfolding, each step guided by the same quiet determination that had brought him this far. As he walked back through the campus, the spring sun casting soft light on the familiar buildings, he felt a sense of peace. He had found his place, not just within the university, but within a larger story of learning, growth, and possibility. He knew that his work was far from over, that each new day brought with it fresh challenges and opportunities, and he was ready, as he had always been, to meet them with a clear mind, an open heart, and the steady resolve that had become his defining strength. As summer approached, the University of Michigan prepared for its annual Innovation and Research Expo. The event was a highlight of the academic calendar, showcasing student and faculty projects that combine creativity with practical solutions. This year, Daniel's traffic optimization project was not just part of the expo, it was one of the main features. His team had expanded their model, integrating new data sets and refining their algorithms to improve accuracy and efficiency. Their system was now capable of processing live traffic feeds, predicting congestion before it occurred, and suggesting alternative routes in real time. The project had moved from theory to practice, with city officials praising its potential to transform urban transportation. The expo took place in the university's largest hall, where rows of booths displayed projects ranging from environmental science to advanced robotics. Screens flickered with presentations, and the air buzzed with excitement. Students, faculty, industry professionals, and community members wandered through the displays, engaging with presenters and exploring the innovations on offer. Daniel's booth stood out not because of flashy graphics or elaborate setups, but for its interactivity. His team had created a live simulation, allowing visitors to see their traffic model in action. A large screen displayed a digital map of the city, with colored lines representing traffic flow. As data streamed in, the model updated dynamically, showing how routes could be adjusted to ease congestion. Visitors could input variables, like a road closure or a sudden increase in vehicles, and watch as the system recalibrated, offering new solutions instantly. The simplicity and clarity of the display drew a crowd. Students asked technical questions, while city officials discussed potential partnerships. Industry professionals saw the broader implications, suggesting applications in logistics and emergency response systems. Daniel and his team handled each interaction with professionalism, explaining their work in a way that was accessible yet detailed enough to satisfy the experts. As the day went on, Daniel found himself in conversation with a senior engineer from a leading technology firm. The man was impressed not only by the project's scope, but by the practical mindset Daniel exhibited. He spoke of potential collaborations, internships, and even future job opportunities. Daniel listened carefully, weighing each word. His approach remained grounded. He asked thoughtful questions, ensuring that any step forward aligned with his long-term goals. He had learned to navigate such conversations with a mix of openness and caution, understanding that not every opportunity was the right fit. Throughout the event, his team remained engaged, their synergy evident to all who stopped by. Daniel made sure each member had their moment to shine, highlighting their individual contributions to the project. His leadership style had created a strong bond within the group, a shared pride in their accomplishments that translated into genuine enthusiasm as they presented their work. The expo concluded with an award ceremony, recognizing the standout projects of the year. When Daniel's team was announced as the winner of the Innovation Impact Award, the applause was immediate and heartfelt. They took the stage together, accepting the award as a unit, their smiles reflecting not just success, but the journey that had brought them there. Daniel spoke briefly, expressing gratitude to his team, the university, and the city officials who had supported their trial run. His words were humble, focusing on the potential of their work to make a real difference. The moment was a culmination of their hard work, but Daniel saw it as a beginning rather than an endpoint. In the weeks that followed, the recognition from the expo opened new doors. His team received invitations to present at conferences, both academic and professional. They began discussions with city planners about expanding their project, potentially integrating it with public transportation systems to create a smarter, more efficient urban infrastructure. The university offered additional resources, providing access to advanced computing facilities and connecting them with experts who could guide the project's growth. Daniel balanced these opportunities with his studies, ensuring that his academic responsibilities remained a priority. He continued to mentor other students, sharing his experiences and encouraging them to pursue their own ideas. His story became a case study in perseverance, a reminder that success was built not only on talent, but on consistency and collaboration. Despite the accolades and growing attention, Daniel remained himself. His days started early, often in the quiet of the library, his notebook open to fresh pages. He continued to explore new ideas, not out of ambition, but out of a genuine curiosity about the world. He approached each challenge with the same steady resolve, focusing not on what he had achieved, but on what he could learn next. His relationships within the university deepened. Professors saw him not just as a student, but as a peer, valuing his insights and seeking his input on research initiatives. His peers found in him a role model, someone who led by example rather than through words alone. He built connections based on mutual respect, always willing to listen, always ready to help. One afternoon, as he sat in his favorite spot by the library window, His phone buzzed with a new email. It was from a national research institute, inviting him to participate in a collaborative project on smart city technologies. The opportunity was significant, a chance to apply his work on a larger scale and to learn from leaders in the field. He read the email twice, considering not just what it meant for him, but for his team and the university. He saw it as a bridge, a way to take what they had built and elevate it to the next level. He knew the decision required careful thought, but beneath the practical considerations, he felt a sense of readiness. His path had always been one of thoughtful progress, each step forward guided by a clear sense of purpose. He replied with a measured interest, outlining his current commitments and expressing a willingness to explore the collaboration further. His response was not a leap but a step, consistent with the way he approached every aspect of his journey. The sun set outside, casting long shadows across the campus. Daniel sat back, his notebook still open, his pen resting on the page. His story had reached another turning point, a new chapter waiting to be written, but as always, he remained focused on the present, on the next problem to solve, the next idea to explore. He understood that success was not a peak but a path, a series of moments where effort met opportunity, and as he sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the library, he knew that his story was not just about where he had been, but about where he was going. His journey was a testament to the power of quiet persistence, a reminder that real impact often began with a single step forward. And as the last light of day faded, Daniel continued to write, each word a promise to himself, each line a new beginning.